Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so Reginald, I was done making videos, man, but I felt really bad. I've done my best to try to get you a video, and it sucked 2 days ago. This is your video, man. This is Judit Polgár of Hungary versus not Magnus Carlsen, Garry Kasparov of Russia, Soviet Union, originally from Baku. Anyway, this is the only time. So it's a spoiler alert. Judit Polgár did win this game. I wanted to get a game where Judit Polgár actually won the game. I was trying to see if I could find one. They played 17 total games against each other, and they were all wins by Garry Kasparov, and all the rest were draws. And this was the only game that she actually won. And this was in 2002. And this is actually when Russia, the tournament was actually called Russia versus Rest of the World. And they've done it 3 times. They did it in 1970, they did it in 1984, and they did this one in 2002. And I believe that was the last time they did it. But it's kind of nice to get Garry Kasparov in Moscow, which is not his severe home, but it's definitely somewhere he's very familiar with. But anyway, to get it rolling, let's see what we got. Let me get over here. Oh, also, for any of you guys that watch my stuff, please hit the subscribe button. As of this moment, I have 797 subscribers, so I need 203 more. Pretty please. And I will have my the rest of my subscriptions that I need to be a YouTube partner. And then that'll allow me to be a little bit more free. And I'll be able to do more chess content for everybody. So appreciate it very much, guys. Magandang umaga. Kamusta? Maraming salamat for checking out my videos. And here we go. Alright, so we have e4. E5, knight to f3. Just going to run through these moves real quick. Knight to c6. Got bishop to b5, knight to f6. And as you know, we have the Berlin on the board. This is the feared Berlin. And it's interesting to note that in all of the games that they played against each other, I think almost every single one of them, Garry Kasparov played the Sicilian. And they got into a Najdorf situation. And he was able to win every single one of those games. Or at least draw some. This time he decides to step away and play what Kramnik played against him. And it didn't go the greatest. Probably 80% of the time that a win is done in the Berlin is from the white side. And it's very, very drawn, and very few people actually win as black in this. So we do have castles by white. We have knight takes e4. We got d4, knight to d6. All real standard stuff I've covered many times before. We have bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6. We got pawn takes e5, knight to f5, queen takes d8 with check. King takes d8 only move. We do have knight to c3. As you guys know, just backing up, we can see some rook to d1s. We can see some h3s. We can see some bishop g5s. Knight to c3. Sometimes we even see knight b to d2. Maybe even rook to e1. That's pretty much everything you can play here as white. So I think it makes the theory a little bit tough for black to remember, the fact that you have so many different moves that are pretty equally good. But you do have knight to c3, and then we have h6. Rook comes to d1 with check. We got king to e8. We have h3. Bishop comes to e7. We have knight to e2, and then we have knight to h4. And this is actually the novelty of the game. Of course, Judit Polgár is too strong to mess this up. So she's not going to go into this line, but one line that you can kind of like dream about. Now, this isn't the best. It does give white a pretty sizable advantage here. But what black, so what we did have in the game, we have knight takes h4, right? But what black is hoping for is that, white tries to play like a very natural developing move or something like that. And maybe go something like bishop to f4, because then after knight takes f3, pawn takes f3, you do win a pawn as black. So that's something that, somebody would have to be careful in that position. But of course, Judit Polgár being at one point the #1 world woman. And so that's kind of what this game is. It's the battle of world #1s. We've had Ho Yifan against Magnus Carlsen before. And then, right now we have, Judit Polgár and Garry Kasparov. And in 2002, Garry Kasparov was still ranked world #1. And I think Judith was actually a little bit later than that. So it would have been probably 2004, 2005, I think, when she hit her peak rating. But anyway, like I said, we do have bishop takes h4. We got bishop to e3, bishop to f5, and then we have the really nice knight to d4. And this is a very multi-purposeful move. Like, not only does it protect c2, it also attacks the bishop. So it's always nice when you can make those moves that you know, where there's multiple threats. And then, you know, of course, you're not going to go c5 because you're going to be looking at knight to b5. And not only do you have an attack on this pawn, now you have a fork coming up. So you definitely don't want to push that. That piece there. So we do see bishop to h7, and then after g4, we see bishop back to e7, because we are trying to make that c5 movement live. Because, you know, of course, now if you do have c5, you know, if you just, let's say, just make like a c3 or something like that, you know, you have something like that. This isn't as bad because, you know, you're going to be able to probably just go back here like this. Or maybe not. I don't know. I didn't really look at these lines. Maybe the king can't move over. That's true. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, the other thing made sense. So, I mean, it's a little bit more live now, I think, maybe. Or it's just retreating so you don't get the bishop trap, something like that. So we do see king to g2. We got h5. h5 is almost always going to come because, you know, with these rooks being stuck in the corner and you not castled, you have to open lines somehow, you know, get these rooks activated. So we do see knight to f5. After bishop to f8, we do see king to f3. And after bishop to g6, we do see rook to d2. We got pawn takes g4, pawn takes g4. We see rook to h3, which isn't really anything. You know, we just kind of move the king back down to g2. And then after rook to h7, we do see king to g3. So we have f6, we got bishop to f4, we got bishop to f5, and we see pawn takes f5, we see pawn takes e5, and we see rook to e1. And as you can see, I mean, this is a pretty good position for white. I mean, we do have these double pawns here, but, you know, it's not the end of the world. At some point, you're going to be able to get rid of one of these pawns. You are going to be winning a pawn here in a second. So you're going to, you know, have your equality and everything hooked up. So we see bishop coming to d6, and after bishop takes e5, we do see king to d7. But, you know, that does put the king into another pin. And so we're trying to exploit that with c4. You know, of course, if black is careless and they play something passive, they're going to get pinned, and that bishop is going to be gone. So, you know, Garry Kasparov, you know, he's not doing any of that stuff. So we do see c5. And then after bishop takes d6, pawn takes d6, we see rook to e6. And in the game, we do see rook 8 to h8. But if we back up here, I wanted to ask you guys, this game, because of its drawish nature, was kind of hard for me to really find a good like pause moment. But this is something I wanted to kind of throw out there. So let's say, for example, you know, the rook came to h6, you know, to try to defend laterally against this threat. You know, why doesn't rook to h6 work? Because, you know, the rook is cool because it's protected by this pawn. So, I mean, if you just kind of trade here or something like that, like, you should be good to go. You know, so it's like, I mean, what's the problem with rook to e6? And I actually had a game of mine that I played myself where this exact thing happened, but it was with a rook and a queen. I guess it's something you might not really fully look out for, but, you know, it's something after you've seen it, it gets kind of like, you know, ingrained in you. So like I said, if you want to go ahead and pause it real quick and just see what is wrong with rook to h6, go ahead real quick. All right, cool. So basically, the thing about this move is the fact that, I mean, white doesn't have to check with this rook. They can actually check with this rook. So if we would see something like that, this is actually going to be winning a pawn. So after the king moves over, you're going to be taking the rook here, and then the pawn will take, and you'd be taken back. And as you can see, you're up just an entire 2 pawns. They are doubled pawns, which they need some care, but this rook is perfectly cutting off this king from coming down. So, like, there's just no problems. I had a game one time where I actually had somebody do something similar, and it was with their queen. And my queen was here, but I was able to actually go ahead and just deliver check like this. And then I was able to actually pick up the queen. This rook was over here, so it just took back, and I took back, and I just had a complete rook. Because, you know, of course, if you are to do that, and you take like this, I mean, you know, the rook can just take, and then you're just down an entire rook. So just keep that stuff in mind when you're playing your games, you know, that, you know, make sure, you know, as far as which one you're taking with, stuff like that. So like I said, we did see rook a to h8 because, you know, Garry Kasparov knows that there's nothing he can do about defending this pawn. So after rook e takes d6, we see king to c8. We have rook 2 to d5, and then we have rook to h3 with check, and we have the very, very accurate king to g2. Now, king to g2 is very great because it's kind of like a way that they're triangulating. She's triangulating her queen and not going just directly in this direction here, because you can run into some checks, you know, with this rook here, kind of like stopping you, you know, because you don't have this flight square here. So that's something you have to be, you know, paying attention to. So just kind of wasting a move almost to get your king in a better position. That's what Judit Polgár actually does. So we see king to g2, rook to h2 with check, and then now after king to f3, we see rook 2 to h3 with check. We see king to e4, and then we see b6. So after rook to c6, we see king to b8. Now, some of you guys might be wondering, like, why don't we go king to b7? Like, it seems like, I mean, you can just kind of throw an attack on this rook, right? The problem with that is it actually puts the rook in a better position, because now you can swing over to g6, and you're going to be attacking this pawn. And there really just isn't a good way to defend it. You could try something like rook 8 to h4 with check, and then after king to e5, you see that there's not really a way for you to check again. There's no checks here. Of course, there's no checks here because of this. And so, I mean, you can try to do something like that, but then after rook to d7 with check, you know, you're just going to be dropping, you know, wherever the king moves, you're just going to be dropping that, pawn. So, you know, that's definitely not something that you want to have, because that's going to be, you know, turning into a queen, pretty soon. So like I said, we did have king to b8. And then after rook to d7, we see rook to h2. We got king to e3, just protecting that pawn. So after rook to f8, we double the rooks. So rook c to c7. So now we have 2 pigs on the 7th, which is the most dangerous you can possibly be. And so after rook takes f5, we have rook to b7 with check. We have king to c8. And let's see here. Cool. And then we have a rook d to c7 with check. The king comes to d8. After rook takes g7, we have king to c8. Rook, and then actually it's in this position. Yes, it's in this position that Garry Kasparov actually resigns. And he basically resigns because this is what you're going to be seeing after this move. You're going to be seeing the rook b come to e7, threatening mate in 1. So you're going to be having to defend against that with rook to f8. And then after rook takes a7, there's just really not a way for you to continuously shake these checkmate threats. Because, you know, you have king to b8 after rook a to f7. You can try to throw in a check, but then the king's just going to move to f3. And then there's just not a whole lot left to do. So now you're just down 2 entire pawns. And there's just like nothing for you to do. And of course, you know, if you were to do something like this, so let's say, for example, you did that and you move back this way. That's just mating, of course. So the king is really restricted in the movements that it can make in these positions and stuff like that. So that is that game. Like I said, it was the one game that I took where Judit Polgár actually won. And I'm going to try to do some more games in the future. I've already done Kasparov games before. This is the first time I've ever done a woman player. And it's not that I don't think that women are better in chess. I mean, I think that women are just as strong as men. I mean, you have Alexandra Kosteniuk, you know, you have Judith and Susan Polgár, you know, you have Ho Yifan. Like, you have all these different women who have challenged and defeated, you know, former world champions, current world champions. And so, you know, in sports, there's definitely a physical difference between men and women a lot of the times, but chess is not one of those things where I feel like women do not play as well as men. At all. I think any human being really has the ability to beat the other one, and it doesn't have anything to do with gender or sex or anything. So, like I said, that is that game, and I'll see if I can't do some more coming up in the future. But Reggie, hopefully you appreciate the video, man. Sorry it took me so long. I had a lot of family stuff going on, and then I got attacked with, you know, this infection in my eye. And so I've been kind of struggling recently, you know. So, yeah, I will see you guys next time. Maraming Salamat, Pa'alam, Magandang Umaga, because it is morning. It is 10:52 in the morning in the Philippines. Maraming Salamat to all my King Maga Kaibagan. Appreciate it very much for coming by and stopping by. And I will see you guys next time. I appreciate it.